Hello everyone. Today's topic for discussion is transportation in plants. We know that animals, which are complex organisms, they do have complex systems like the circulatory system, digestive system, excretory system, reproductive system. So basically, the transportation in animals or in humans takes place through the circulatory system, which involves basically blood vessels, and the heart. Plants, they're relatively simpler when compared to animals or the humans, but they do carry out complex processes like in animals and humans. So, how actually does transportation take place in plants? So, before diving into the topic, let's discuss what a cell is, protoplasm, tissues, xylem and phloem, water potential, absorption and movement of water, theories of water translocation, source and sink, mass flow hypothesis, mycorrhiza. Cell. Who first discovered the cell? It was first discovered by Robert Hooke. He discovered dead cells in cork. And later another scientist, Anton von Leeuwenhoek, he discovered living cells. So after the discovery of cells, the cell theory was put forward by Schleiden and Schwann, a botanist and a zoologist, who said that the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. That means every organism starts the life with a small structure called the cell. And the cell performs all the various types of metabolic reactions in it which sustains the life. So it is the basic structural and functional unit. All organisms are made up of cells. These two were the postulates of the cell theory put forward by Schleiden and Schwann. Later, Rudolf Virchow, he added one more point or elaborated the theory of cell, saying that cells arise from pre-existing cells. They divide and give rise to new cells. Now here you can see a typical plant cell containing a cell wall. So basically the cell wall sees that no pathogenic bacteria enter into the cell, or it provides rigidity to the cell. It gives shape to the cell. Then it is surrounded by a plasma membrane, and the space between the cell wall and the plasma membrane is known as the intercellular space. This is the intercellular space. Now we have the plasma membrane, and then this is the jelly viscous fluid-like structure where all the metabolic reactions take place, respiration, photosynthesis, any type of these reactions, they actually take place in the cytoplasm. So basically, after the cytoplasm, you have a large vacuole. Plants usually have large vacuoles which push the nucleus towards the periphery, towards the corner. And this vacuole is surrounded by a membrane known as tonoplast. Okay. Now, before understanding the mechanism, actually how this transportation takes place, let us clearly understand about plasma membrane, protoplast and protoplasm. Now, we have seen that the cell is surrounded by a cell wall, but we never consider cell wall as the outer boundary of cell. Instead, plasma membrane acts as the outer boundary of cell. Why is it so? See, basically membranes can be of three types. They can be permeable, semi-permeable or selectively permeable. When I say a membrane is permeable, that means there is no restriction in the movement. It can, now this is a solvent molecule, consider this is water molecule, and this is a solute molecule, consider it as sugar molecule, salt or glucose. When I say permeable, that means there is no restriction. It allows any type of molecule. It can be a solvent or a solute, either into the cell or out of the cell. So that is permeability. When I say semi-permeable, as the name suggests, it only allows the movement of solvent molecules and does not allow the solute particles. Okay, only the solvent molecules are allowed to enter into the cell. Semi-permeable. Selectively permeable. That means it is a type of membrane where It regulates the flow of movement of molecules, which type of molecules should go inside, which type of molecules have to come inside. It allows both solute and solvent, but high regulation. Which kind of solvent? Specific types of solvent molecules, specific type of solute molecules can pass through it. Example of permeable is cell wall. It acts as a permeable membrane. No restriction, allows all the solute molecules and solvent to pass through the cell. Semi-permeable, example is egg membrane or goat bladder. These are examples of semi-permeable membrane which allow only solvent molecules to pass, not the solute. Selectively permeable, best example is plasma membrane. So that's the reason plasma membrane is considered as outer boundary. It acts like a watchman for the cell. It sees who is entering, who has to move out of the cell, something like that. Okay, and often the protoplasm is synonymously used with cytoplasm. But what actually is protoplasm? Protoplasm constitutes vacuole along with cytoplasm. These together, it's called protoplasm. What is protoplast? Protoplasm along with plasma membrane is called protoplast. Okay, I hope now that there is clear distinction between protoplasm and cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is nothing but a viscous fluid-like substance present where metabolic reactions takes place. This is cytoplasm. But when I say protoplasm, it involves vacuole and the cytoplasm. That together constitutes protoplasm. That's what is given here. Okay. Now tissues. Now we understood what actually is a cell. Now let us understand tissues. What are tissues? They are basically group of similar kinds of cells that perform a same function. Basically, what are tissues? A group of cells, similar kind of cells that perform a same type of function. Now the tissues can be simple or they can be complex. Simple type of tissues, that means they are made up of only same kind of cells, but complex tissues are made up of more than one kind of cell. Examples of complex tissues are xylem and phloem. They are also known as xylem and phloem, together known as vascular tissues, because they play a vital role in transport. Xylem is the tissue that helps in transport of water and minerals, while phloem, it helps in transport of food. But this transport of water, now let us consider a plant system. Okay, and here you have the root system. We all know that the root hairs, they absorb the water from the soil, and from the roots the water reaches the stem. From the stem it goes to the leaves, and sometimes it goes to the developing buds, and this is how the movement of water takes place. Have you ever observed that water moves from the flowers back to the stem, and from the stem to the roots, and from the roots it goes back to the soil? Never, right? So always there is only unidirectional flow. Okay, from the roots upward. The water moves upwards from the roots to the tip of the plant. That's the reason xylem is involved in unidirectional transport of water and minerals. Bidirectional flow is seen in phloem. Consider a plant, leaves, root system. Obviously, we all know that leaf is the site where food is produced. So from the leaves, the food, the organic nutrients, they move to the stem, they move to the roots. Okay, this is one flow. But when the conditions are unfavorable, sometimes, that means if the plant is not receiving sufficient amount of light, in such cases what actually happens is, consider potato plant. We know that there are root tubers developing, right? These tubers are nothing but stem modifications where the stem is highly swollen. Why is it so? Because it is rich in starch. Okay, in such cases what happens is, the food which is stored inside the roots, it moves into the stem, it moves into the young mature leaves. So there is movement either from the leaves to various parts, or from the roots to different parts, or from the fruits to various parts. Even fruits also act as storage of food material. They can also provide food to the buds, developing leaves. So there is bidirectional movement. So phloem is involved in bidirectional transport, while xylem is involved in unidirectional transport. Xylem is involved in water and mineral transport, and phloem is involved in transport of food. Now, I told you xylem and phloem are complex tissues. That means they are made up of one kind of cells. If you see xylem, it is made up of vessels, tracheids, and fibers. And phloem, it is made up of phloem parenchyma, companion cell, and sieve tube. Where this is sieve cell, and many such sieve cells together we call it as sieve tube, and each sieve cell is connected through a sieve plate, and they are associated with a companion cell which has nucleus, and close to it is the phloem parenchyma, which helps in support and also for storage. In the same way, xylem has vessel, tracheids, and the fibers. So basically these xylem vessels are continuous with perforation plates that allow the movement of water upwards. Okay, now let us talk about water. Now we all know that plants, they are made up of 90% with water. If you consider the cytoplasm in leaves of a typical plant, it has 75% water, and the remaining can be proteins, they can be organic nutrients, mineral nutrients, etc. In case of stem, the cytoplasm contains 60%. But is the amount of water constant in every plant? Obviously no. It varies from plant to plant, depends on the different conditions, the physiological condition, environmental condition in which the plant is growing. If you consider xerophytes, these are the plants which grow in high extreme temperatures, like cactus is a good example. The cytoplasm contains water which is less than 60%. Consider the example of hydrophytes like your lotus, nilambu. These plants, their cytoplasm is having water which is more than 95%. If you see dormant seeds, what are dormant seeds? Now see, usually seeds, when they have favorable conditions, that means proper sunlight, proper temperature, good amount of water is available, then the seeds germinate. But if the conditions are unfavorable, if they are harsh, if the environment temperature is very harsh, very cold temperature or very hot, or water availability is very less, in such cases the seed develops a tough coating known as seed coat. In such conditions they are said to be dormant, inactive. Dormant seeds usually contain less than 10%. Okay. And cytoplasm we already discussed, it is the site where all the metabolic reactions take place, and it is only viable only when there is sufficient amount of water present in it. Water acts as a universal solvent, and that's the only reason when roots take up water from the soil, it's not only just the water but also even the mineral nutrients present in the soil, they get dissolved in water and the roots take them along with water. Okay, now we discussed water. We discussed about what actually a tissue is and what are the tissues which help in transport of water as well as food material. Now, is the water which is available in ground, is all that water usable by plants? Let us see. Gravitational water, that means when there is a rainfall, the water percolates inside the soil. That means it gets deeply absorbed inside the soil and goes into deep layers. Such type of water where the water droplets fall onto the soil and they reach into the deeper layers of the soil, such water cannot be used by plants. So this is unused water. No way the root hairs can absorb such water because the water gets deeply percolated inside the layers of soil of the earth's crust. And if you talk about hygroscopic water, now soil particles which are present inside the ground, each soil particle, it forms a tight film with the water by the process of imbibition. We'll discuss about this process in further slides. So even this water where there is tight film of water which is being held by the soil particle cannot be taken up by the root hairs. Even this cannot be used up by plant. What is capillary water? It is the water which can be utilized by plants. It is the loose film of water surrounding the soil particles which makes it available for the root hairs to take up. So out of the gravitational water, hygroscopic water and capillary water, which is the water which is absorbed by the root hairs? It is the capillary water. Gravitational water is not for use and even hygroscopic water cannot be absorbed by root hairs. It's only the capillary water. Water potential. Now, for any organism to grow and reproduce, they need energy. Energy to do work. That energy available to do work is called free energy. What is water potential? It is the potential energy of water, or in simple terms you can tell it is the free water molecules which are available. Okay, and basically this water potential helps in movement of water from one region to another. This usually it is observed that water always moves from a region of higher water potential to a region of lower water potential. To understand this, let us consider an example where I consider two beakers. Okay, in this beaker I added 50 ml of water, and even in this I added 50 ml of water. So the solvent is nothing but your water. Here I added 2 grams of sugar, and here I added 200 grams of sugar. Now where is water concentration more? Obviously here, more water molecules and the solute particles are very less. Here amount of water is same in both the beakers, but obviously amount of solute particles are very high. In case of this beaker A, let us consider this as beaker A and beaker B. In case of beaker A, obviously the amount of free water molecules are high. Only some water molecules are held with the sugar particles, but here most of the water molecules are held with sugar. Water always moves from a region of higher water potential to a region of lower water potential. So here this beaker has more water potential, more free water molecules are present. So as a result, when you connect it with a pipe or something, water starts moving from beaker A to beaker B. Okay, this water potential is usually represented by the symbol psi W. And how is it measured? See, anything we measure it. If it is energy, like we measure it in joules. If it is power, watts. Or if it's current, amperes, force, Newton. In the same way, water potential has same units as pressure. So it is measured in pascals, PA. 1 megapascal is equal to 10 bars. And this is an important point to be noted. Pure water means water which does not have any solutes in it, only water molecules. It has psi W value as 0. Okay, once when we start adding solutes, then what happens? The amount of free water molecules available in the system reduces. As a result, water potential becomes negative. And it is found that water potential equation is psi W is equal to psi S plus psi P plus psi G, where psi W is water potential, psi S is solute potential, psi P is pressure potential, and psi G is gravitational potential. We understood what is water potential. It is the free water molecules which are available in the system, or the potential energy of water which allows the water to flow in a system from one region to another. What is solute potential? It is the effect of solutes on water potential. If more solutes are added, then obviously the amount of free water molecules available in the system is less, and thus the water potential reduces. So solute potential is also called osmotic potential. And what is pressure potential? Now for example, when water is entering inside a cell, then what happens? This water builds up pressure in the system. That is called pressure potential or hydrostatic pressure. It can be negative or positive. What is gravitational potential? Effect of gravity on water potential. It can be taken into account only when the vertical heights are greater than 5 meters. Less than that, it is considered to be negligible. That's the reason always most of the time water potential equation will be psi W is equal to psi S plus psi P. Now in mathematics, we know that there are numbers above 0 and below 0, right? Where we say these numbers -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, all these numbers as integers, right? I told you pure water has a water potential of 0. Like obviously there are no solute particles added to it, and thus the maximum value is 0. Now if we add solutes to the water, obviously water potential decreases and it has a value below 0, from -1, -2 to anywhere. So we know that in maths, -1 is greater than -2, -2 is greater than -3, -3 is greater than -4. That means obviously -8 is far less than -1, right? So -1 is greater than -8, something like this. Consider a beaker having a water potential of -1 atmosphere. Another beaker having a water potential of -8 atmospheres. That means -1 is more or -8 is more. -1 is more. The number -1 is more. That means this beaker is having more water potential than this beaker. Here the water potential is very less. How is the movement of water from B to A or A to B? Water always moves from higher water potential to lower water potential. Or you can also say water always moves from water potential value of negative to more negative. Okay, so this is how the movement of water takes place. So after understanding the concept of water potential, now let us really understand how this absorption of water takes place by the root hairs from the soil. Okay, absorption and movement of water. Now see, these are the water droplets. These are the soil particles. This is the root hair. Okay, and the first layer of the root hair is known as the epidermis. The epidermis is followed by a multi-layered cortex, and the cortex is followed by endodermis. Endodermis is followed by a pericycle, and the pericycle surrounds the vascular tissue which constitutes xylem and the phloem. Okay, now how does the water movement takes place? So basically the root, now if you see, water potential is high in soil, whereas in the root water potential is less. So movement takes place from the soil to the root hair. From the root hair, water moves into the cortex. From the cortex, it enters into the endodermis. From the endodermis, it enters into the pericycle. From the pericycle, it enters into the xylem of the roots. From the xylem of the roots, it enters into the xylem of the stems. From xylem of stems, xylem of the petioles. From the xylem of petioles, it enters into the leaves. This is the pathway of how the movement of water takes place. But actually, there was a scientist by the name Munch who actually proposed that this movement of water from the soil into the root system can take place either by symplastic pathway or apoplastic pathway. To understand the symplastic pathway and apoplastic pathway, first we need to understand what is apoplast and what is a symplast. Apoplast means cell wall and the intercellular spaces. Consider these two cells. Any plant cell always has a cell wall surrounding it and a plasma membrane, and space between the plasma membrane and the cell wall is the intercellular space. So the cell wall along with the intercellular space constitutes apoplast, the non-living part, and the cytoplasm is the symplast. Now see, these two cells are connected by a thin passage. This is called plasmodesmata. Okay, where the cytoplasm continuity is maintained. So that is called plasmodesmata. So the cytoplasm along with the plasmodesmata, you can't say here only cytoplasm, even the vacuole. So cytoplasm along with vacuole is called protoplasm, right? What is protoplasm? Cytoplasm plus vacuole, the contents of vacuole and the cytoplasm together constitutes protoplasm. That along with the plasmodesmata is called symplast. Now we understood what is apoplast. It is the non-living part of a cell. Basically, the cell wall and the intercellular spaces is called apoplast. And what is symplast? The protoplasm along with the plasmodesmata is the symplast. They said that the movement of water from the soil into the root system takes place by two pathways, apoplastic pathway and symplastic pathway. Now, if you consider this system here, we know these are basically, just a minute, okay, so basically this is the root hair, this is your epidermis, cortex, you have the endodermis, pericycle, then after that you have the xylem. Okay, now the movement of water from movement of water from the soil, it occurs through the root hair. From the root hair, it enters into the epidermis. From the epidermis, it enters into the cortex. Till here, the movement takes place by apoplast. That means what? This movement of water is occurring through the cell wall and the intercellular spaces. That means water which is present in the epidermis enters into the cortex through the cell wall and the intercellular spaces. Here also it enters through the cell wall and intercellular spaces. Cell wall and intercellular spaces. So the movement is taking place to the cell wall and intercellular spaces till the cortex. But in the endodermis, you can see the endodermal cells are usually coated with suberin, which does not allow water to pass through it. So therefore, it is said to be these thickenings are called Casparian thickenings or Casparian strips, where the endodermal cells are coated with suberin. Then, can the water enter through the suberin material which is not allowing water molecule? No, obviously it cannot enter through the cell wall. That's the reason the water which is present in the cytoplasm and the vacuole, now it enters into the endodermis by symplastic pathway. Through the protoplasm and the plasmodesmata it enters. From the endodermis it enters into the pericycle and then enters into the xylem cells. And from the xylem of the roots, it enters into the xylem of the stem, from the xylem of the stem to the xylem of the petiole, and finally into the mesophyll cells of the leaf. Okay, so basically in this way, the water transport in the root takes place by apoplastic pathway from the soil till the cortex, and from cortex to the endodermis, it takes place by symplastic pathway. This is a point that you need to remember. That's because the endodermal cells are coated with Casparian thickenings. That means they are suberized basically. Okay. Okay, that is what is actually explained here. This is apoplastic pathway. That means the movement occurring through cell wall or intercellular spaces. Symplastic pathway, it is the movement taking place through the plasmodesmata or the cytoplasm. Vacuolar pathway, this together constitutes the symplastic pathway. Why? It involves the protoplasm as well as the plasmodesmata. Now let us understand what actually is diffusion. It is a random movement of individual molecules from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. Consider a simple example. Now, if you are in a room and you lit an incense stick at one corner of the room, after maybe 10 minutes, you can see that the smell of this incense stick will spread throughout the room. So what actually happened initially, consider you are in a room and you lit the incense stick at one corner of the room. Here the concentration of those molecules, the gas molecules of the incense stick is very high. So what actually happens? They move from a region of higher concentration to a region of low concentration. And soon, after 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you can see that the smell is spread throughout the room. Okay, this process where there is random movement of molecules from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration is called diffusion. And this occurs along the concentration gradient. Along means from higher concentration to lower concentration. Now just tell me, if there is a hill and you are present somewhere here, you need to climb down the hill from A to B. Do you require energy? Yeah, we do require energy, but it is far less when compared to this situation, where I say that you need to climb up a hill from A to B. So in the same way here, the movement is taking place from higher concentration to low concentration. So there is no energy required. It's a passive process. And best example, as I told you, incense stick or a perfume. When you spray perfume also, okay, the molecules of the perfume, they start spreading, and even the place where you walk, you can feel the smell. Another example is just take a beaker of water and add ink to it. Initially, the ink droplets are present only in the upper surface, and slowly they start diffusing and the whole beaker turns blue or pink depending on the ink that you use. Other best example is solid diffused in liquids. Example is KMnO4, potassium permanganate crystals. When they are dissolved, initially you can see the pink color only through this region. But slowly what happens? The molecules start diffusing and the entire flask turns pink. Okay, so this is solids getting diffused in liquids. Or sometimes naphthalene balls, if they're kept in a room, they'll start diffusing, okay, where the smell starts spreading throughout the room. So basically diffusion is a random movement of molecule from region of high concentration to a region of low concentration where no energy is required. It is a passive process.